Have U.S. astronauts found proof of UFOs, only to be forbidden to tell us what they know? Have probes to the planet Mars captured photographs that we are not allowed to see? Do these videotapes reveal a terrifying truth that NASA has kept hidden from the people of Earth? Astounding images from other worlds and the long-kept secret they may uncover in this chapter of the UFO Diaries. The official history of space travel begins in 1961, when cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin blasted into Earth orbit aboard the Vostok 1 space capsule. Soon after, Alan Shepard flew an American Mercury capsule into space, and the so-called space race officially began.
35 years ago,
U.S. President John F. Kennedy encouraged the American space efforts to set their sights on a seemingly impossible goal:
we choose to go to the moon.
Landing a manned spacecraft on the moon before the end of the 1960s.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
And in July of 1969, that goal was in fact achieved. The space race had been won. And the real winner was the organization that had made it happen, the American Space Agency, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So to many people, it had always seemed logical that if humankind were to ever find proof of another intelligent life on other worlds, that discovery would certainly be made first by NASA and immediately shared with the rest of the world. And for a time at least, it seemed that astronauts did report frequent encounters with UFOs. In fact, astronauts have apparently been reporting UFO sightings from the very beginning of manned spaceflight.
The first Russian in space, Yuri Gagarin, came back and said, I know these things are real, they exist, they have incredible capabilities. I'll talk more about it if given the permission to do so. To my knowledge, he wasn't given permission to do so.
And some of the Americans who would later become astronauts had reported UFO sightings during their days testing experimental planes.
Beginning in the early 60s with the testing of the X-15 rocket-powered jet, there were some of the pilots in that program that came forward and said that part of their mission was to detect UFOs. It almost appears as if there was a window where the people that worked for NASA were able to talk more freely about the UFO subject, and today that doesn't appear to be the case.
And according to many sources, one of those astronauts who reported seeing UFOs during those early days was space pioneer Gordon Cooper, both in his test pilot days and as a Mercury and Gemini astronaut. And he apparently worked hard to make sure his story was heard and believed.
We're cruising at altitudes higher than any other living being has ever reached. And if some other living being is somehow managing to fly around on the edge of our atmosphere, well, it's our job to find out about it.
Mr. Cooper, Mr. Cooper, what about the lack of oxygen?
Gordon Cooper made a statement to the United Nations. He wrote a letter, said, I've seen UFOs. I think they're extraterrestrial, you know, and other people have seen them as well. And then, boom, you didn't hear from him for 15, 20 years about it.
Why would Gordon Cooper fall silent about his encounters with UFOs? Was it simply because no one believed his story? It seems odd that such a well-trained observer and so skilled a pilot as Gordon Cooper could actually report a UFO sighting only to be largely ignored by the agency that had sent him out into space. Why would this brave explorer of the unknown suddenly stop talking about his UFO sightings? Many UFO researchers believe it was because Gordon Cooper and others were ordered to keep quiet, and that those orders came from NASA itself.
NASA has even been found in the embarrassing position of ridiculing some of our own astronauts. When some of the guys get back from space and want to talk about what they've seen and what happened on the moon and what occurred while they were in orbit, NASA shuts them up, literally threatens them.
Supposing for a moment that all of this is true, it would seem NASA first sent astronauts into the upper atmosphere and then into space, where some of those pilots saw and reported encounters with UFOs. Then, suddenly, those astronauts stopped reporting such sightings.
I know that when I first started researching UFOs, I wrote to NASA. I got the addresses for every American who'd ever been in space, and I wrote to them. I wrote to all of them, especially underlining parts to those astronauts who had had alleged encounters in space, and I asked them, is it true? Not one single response. Not a letter back to say, you're crazy, leave me alone. No response at all. And I've spoken to people who've been in the space program. The response is, you're not supposed to talk about this stuff. There are numerous reports about alleged encounters in space. The astronauts, to a large degree, will not talk about it.
NASA's status in the federal government allows them to enforce their policies with substantial power.
NASA has regulations that they can send people to prison, put them in quarantine indefinitely if there's been some sort of a contact with extraterrestrial objects or beings.
Does NASA really have the power to silence astronauts who have seen a spaceship or being from another world? And if so, why? Is it not the stated mission of NASA to report whatever it finds in space, including any proof of extraterrestrial life?
NASA's paranoid about UFOs or anything related to ET. You know, they had the SETI program, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, for a number of years. They changed the name of it to something like High Resolution Survey because they didn't want ET in there, even though that's exactly what they're looking for.
The space agency has never admitted to contact with an ET life form of any kind. But is it possible that the real truth has been hidden for decades? If NASA had strong supported evidence that our astronauts were encountering vehicles from another planet, why would this astounding news be kept secret? Why would an organization devoted to scientific discovery cover up its most important finding? Some scientists now believe the real reason is all too clear.
I know it's been suggested that our government and other governments have been denying or covering up UFO evidence. If that's true, it's easy to understand. It could be that they are trying to protect some advanced technology development that they're working on. So by maintaining a cover, they're confusing, and that's part of the game that governments sometimes have to play. But I think there may be another reason, and that is that if the phenomenon is real, and they know it's real, then they don't want to admit to the public that they can't protect us from the phenomenon.
Is NASA's silence on the matter of UFOs an attempt to cover up a threat posed by invaders from another world? Could the military missions taken on by the space shuttle be part of some secret war currently waged between humans and extraterrestrials? Coming up, an astounding story of military forces on Earth confronting vessels from another world when UFO Diaries returns. It seems incredible that the same agency that sent men to the moon in the name of science might also withhold information about those exploratory missions. But it might be easier to understand NASA drawing a veil of secrecy around the development of a secret weapon for the government. After all, it would not be the first time that the development of a military device has been hidden from the general public. Since NASA draws its personnel and technology largely from the military and has stated openly that it currently conducts secret military missions, could the space agency be protecting a secret about UFOs? A secret that the government armed forces do not want the general public to know. UFO researcher Robert Dean says there is no question that NASA is hiding the very same secret he discovered during his tour of duty in the NATO armed forces.
When I arrived in Paris in '63, I was assigned to the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe that I learned of a study that had been initiated in 1961. And the simple reason that they established this was that we and the Soviets had almost gone to war with each other at least a half a dozen times. And one of the reasons that we were having problems at that time in Europe was that large numbers of circular metallic objects were flying out of the Soviet sector over the Warsaw Pact areas. These objects would fly at a high altitude, at a high rate of speed. Well, for a time, the Soviets thought that those objects belonged to us. And for a while, we even suspected that they might belong to the Soviets. But after a while, it became very clear to everybody that the technology that had been demonstrated repeatedly was so far beyond anything we and the Soviets had in 1961. So that left a big unanswered question is, who are these people?
According to Dean, the government study concluded that UFOs were indeed extraterrestrial vehicles, and that they commanded power so far in excess of our own that they could easily defeat us in any combat.
Now, I have a feeling that certain members of our government know more about it than they've ever shared with the people. The lies that have been told to the American people in the last 50 years to keep the lid on this subject, it goes beyond the realm of absurdity.
If the highest powers of world government were aware of extraterrestrial visitors in the early 1960s, it does seem logical that our first astronauts would have been somehow prepared for the beings that they might encounter out in space. So, did NASA begin a policy as early as the 1960s of denying any reports of UFOs, even if that report came from their own astronauts? According to a growing number of UFO researchers, it's not only astronauts whose reports are being suppressed, but even the findings of unmanned space probes as well. Strange features discovered by the Viking Mars probe have stirred controversy throughout the scientific community. And now, many researchers say NASA has deliberately hidden some of what it knows about these shapes on the Martian surface. Could this be because these structures are proof of a long-extinct civilization on another world?
Some people have speculated that NASA is afraid that it'll lose funding if it even so much as hints that it might imagine that there are extraterrestrial artifacts on Mars or elsewhere in the solar system.
Many of the Martian features photographed by Viking do seem to be more than simple flukes of nature. But so far, no NASA official has admitted the possibility that these could be artifacts constructed by any kind of intelligent life form. But Stanley McDaniel has performed one of the most exhaustive studies possible on the photographs of the monuments of Mars, and now believes there may be some at NASA who are not telling all they know.
NASA scientists have made a series, you might call it a string, of bad arguments and faulty reasoning regarding this topic. And I believe that it deserves a serious look by serious scientists, and there are some scientists who are looking at this seriously, but NASA ignores them.
Most of the controversy revolves around this photograph, which appears to show a mile-long sculpture of a human face. NASA officials dismissed the appearance of the face, claiming that other images from the same area showed nothing of the kind.
For over 17 years, NASA insisted there was a second photograph in which the face disappears, proving that the facial appearance was merely a trick of light and shadow. Actually, there was no such second photograph in which the face disappears, and NASA has recently admitted that this is the case.
Could an agency dedicated to exploring other worlds really have deliberately concealed such a startling discovery? At first, it appeared that the world would soon learn the truth when the unmanned space probe Mars Observer approached the red planet for a closer look. But just as it was approaching Mars, the observer stopped sending back images, apparently having suddenly malfunctioned. But some UFO researchers say that the observer never stopped sending back images, but NASA has, for some reason, prevented the general public from seeing the results. Some even claim that NASA now routinely monitors the public broadcasts of all its space missions, just to keep the general public from seeing things NASA would prefer remain secret.
The American people cannot sit down here and watch what's going on. There's a time delay, which will give the guys in the NASA control room time to edit something from the tape.
If this is true, then it was a freak accident that allowed some surprising images from the space shuttle to be broadcast on American cable television. That astounding video footage and the terrifying secret these images may conceal when UFO Diaries returns. At present, the workhorse of the American space program is NASA's fleet of shuttles. These reusable vehicles have taken more men and women into Earth orbit than all the rest of the U.S. space programs combined. And on their satellite launch missions and trips to make repairs on damaged space hardware, the shuttles have beamed back to Earth thousands of hours of videotape of their journeys. Now UFO researchers are claiming that some of those videotapes show shocking proof of the reality of alien visitors to Earth.
A couple of years ago, there was a shuttle flight where they apparently were filming something that was live.
And we got a whole bunch of them that we're using for the SRO guys. And if you give me just a second, I'll show you the footage of the external tank.
They had the cameras going, and something began to happen out there that ended up on the film and was also monitored by people on the ground who were listening and watching.
At that time, video signals from NASA spacecraft were routinely transmitted to NASA Select, a cable television channel available in many parts of the United States.
It was embarrassing for NASA because the people who were watching this thing live were seeing something that indicated that there was UFOs involved. Perhaps alien spaceships.
And some spaceflight enthusiasts videotaped the broadcast, convinced that they had captured an encounter between the space shuttle and a UFO. But might there not be a more commonplace explanation for these strange images? Scientists at NASA studied the tape and explained that it shows nothing more than the kind of ice crystals that are formed when the shuttle dumps wastewater into the extreme cold of space.
So, whenever these ice particles are caught in the path of the space shuttle's engine exhaust, their course of direction is significantly altered. Confident that Dr. Jack Casher will come to the same conclusions that we have at NASA, that these were ice crystals and nothing more.
I started with the assumption that these objects actually were ice particles, which is what the four NASA scientists said they were. And in order to be accurate and scientific, I had to then prove that these objects really were ice crystals close to the shuttle. But I really couldn't do it. The angles were wrong, the speeds were wrong, and if they were ice particles, they would move in a way that's different from what was actually on the film. And once you rule out ice crystals or ice particles, then you don't have many more options. They can't be meteors because meteors don't change direction. Satellites and space junk don't change direction either. So the only option is that they were intelligently maneuvering craft out in space away from the shuttle. And now you only have two possibilities. They were either terrestrial or extraterrestrial in origin. I think we can rule out the fact that these were piloted by humans, because if they were more than 10 miles away, which I think is fairly likely, then the accelerations that they underwent would absolutely flatten and crush a human pilot.
If Dr. Casher's analysis of the videotape is correct, and the object seen making such a dramatic reversal of course is a vehicle from another planet, then other features of the video take on a new and terrifying meaning. For example, what are these thin white streaks that seem to mark a line between a point on the ground and one of the UFOs?
Certainly one possible interpretation is that these objects, these streaks, were missiles that were fired at the spacecraft. If they were missiles, then it's clear that the UFO quickly changed direction and evaded them very, very easily.
In the mid-1980s, the American military supposedly began work on orbiting weapons for the Strategic Defense Initiative, ostensibly to defend certain nations against nuclear missile attacks from other nations. Could the space shuttle video reveal that the real purpose of SDI was not to defend Earth's people from each other, but to try to defend them from a threat outside of this world?
The film that Don Ratch captured from NASA Select shows what it appears to show. Then I think we have a strong indication that the extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth. And someone might be shooting at them, and if so, they are easily evading these very advanced weapons.
Is this the secret that some researchers claim NASA has hidden? That our world is at war with beings from another planet? that astounding possibility when UFO Diaries return. The evidence presented by a small group of UFO researchers may seem insufficient cause for making accusations against such an esteemed organization as NASA. But what if the claims these researchers make are true? Is it possible that NASA really has withheld information of vital importance, kept secrets from the people who have funded and supported their work? And if so, why? Could it be that they fear a panic would ensue if people believed we were at war with beings from another world?
The videotape does seem to suggest that there is some kind of advanced weaponry being used up there. There's another video taken on the same shuttle mission that shows a number of strange moving objects, and it's clear from the camera motion that NASA is tracking one of them closely. A close-up of one of these objects shows that it's got a triangular or delta shape, very much like the shape that has been described by UFO witnesses on the ground. There certainly appear to be a number of interesting objects up in the sky, and NASA is aware of this and clearly tracked at least one of them.
Are the skies over our heads filled with potentially hostile UFOs? Is it possible that once in outer space, no one could ever again deny the existence of UFOs? It does seem that space shuttle cameras are constantly capturing UFOs on tape, presumably because there are so many of them flying around over the Earth. This image, for example, was apparently captured by a shuttle mission over 10 years ago, and this one was taken later on the same mission. And what are these objects photographed from a shuttle in March 1994? They seem to cross tremendous distances in far less time than is possible with any human technology. And now it appears that NASA has stopped its public transmission of images from outer space, apparently as a result of these space shuttle videotapes.
After NASA went through gymnastics explaining that away, lying through their teeth, they changed the policy. There is no longer live telecasts from shuttle launches.
Why? Why would the space agencies send people and machines out to explore the unknown, but then keep their findings a secret? It's possible that the real truth is the result of a study commissioned by NASA in the early 1960s.
NASA had asked the Brookings Institute, essentially, to come up with some decisions and some thoughts and some comments about the implications in the future of what would happen if we were to discover and learn the reality of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Many people believe that this study is the basis of the UFO cover-up because it indicates that contact with an advanced civilization could lead to the destruction of our social institutions.
In fact, that Brookings Institute study warned that throughout human history, various cultures have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies.
I can't be 100% sure that there is a bona fide cover-up and that there's a big dark secret that the United States government is trying to cover up. But if there were, it's my opinion that it would have to do with the status quo and how disrupted our social institutions would be if all of a sudden we were told that we're not alone and that these beings are more advanced than us.
Will we ever really know how much or how little our space agency knows about extraterrestrial visitors? Perhaps someday soon the answer will become clear. Or perhaps it will forever be one of the many unanswered questions in the UFO Diaries.